to precede what I'm about to say, I want to quote what Gayton McKenzie announced shortly after he'd been appointed to cabinet as the sports minister. And this was at the time when he said that the department was going to stop superfans from travelling across the world to support South African teams and do so on the taxpayers' money. And I quote from his post on X, "I have stopped all trips for superfans. We have athletes and artists who are struggling to raise money to attend sporting events and exhibitions. How do we justify paying for fans? We shall no longer be paying for these trips and will use that money where it's needed the most." Use that money, George, where it's needed the most. And where do you think that money has been spent? On Gayton McKenzie, going to the Olympics. You see, he misunderstood Tumamina. He didn't realize that when Cyril said Tumamina, he was asking South Africans to say, send me to where I can do some good for the country. He wasn't saying Tumamina in the sense of Gayton McKenzie, saying, send me to the Olympics. And the answer to the parliamentary question reveals that it cost the taxpayer, you, George, me, Sabra, Alexis, 1.8 million rand to send Gayton McKenzie and 7 officials to the Olympic Games. His flight cost 215,976 rand and 36 cents. That's what Gayton McKenzie's return flight to Paris cost. Maybe business class fares were more expensive because it was the time of the Olympics, and at times like that, travel to Olympic host cities is going to be more expensive. So maybe it was a business class flight that cost 215,976 rand and 36 cents. But maybe it was a first class flight. That information is not given. If you divide the number of athletes and athlete support by the total amount of money that was spent on the athletes, the 27 million plus, it works out to 199,000 rand per athlete, plus that athlete's support, physio, coach, whatever. So his flight cost more than the entire spend on an athlete. But that flight figure is not the most puzzling. The most puzzling thing, and this comes from Gayton McKenzie himself. So this is not fake news. This is not journalists making up stuff. This is what Gayton McKenzie's department has answered to a parliamentary question. Ground transport cost 454,005 rand. I ask you with tears in my no, they're not baby blue. I ask you with tears in my muddy brown eyes, how on earth do you spend 454,005 rand on ground transport to get from your expensive hotel, or maybe not so expensive, because that only cost 113,271 rand. So he wasn't staying in the Georges Cinq. But how can his ground transport cost 4 times what his accommodation cost and twice what his luxurious flight cost? Well, insurance only cost 592 rand and 63 cents, which gives you an indication how much of his trip there was worth. That the insurance payout, if he hadn't managed to go, would only be in 592 and 63. I mean, it's absurd, people. It's absurd. It is absurd that, okay, I mean, I don't know that they should have spent a total of 1.3 million rand, because that's it. 1.3 million rand has been spent on the Superfan program. And I don't know much about the Superfan program. I don't know how many superfans were, and I'm bloody sure they travelled at the back of the plane and didn't probably had to pay for their own ground transport. So I don't know how many superfans went to how many South African events to be superfans at those events internationally. But the total cost of the Superfan program was 1.3 million rand. To get Gayton McKenzie and a couple of officials to the Olympics, that cost 1.8 million rand. How on earth can we take him seriously? How on earth? I ask you this. What quantifiable, measurable difference to athletes' performance did his presence in Paris provide? Zero. Bugger all. Bugger all. If he hadn't gone, nothing would have changed. When's it going to stop? When's the gravy train going to derail, I ask?